The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. Story 1. Erased by Google. Hello, my name is... Let's try that again. My name is... Okay, my name is irrelevant. Not that you'd remember it if you did read it, or even if I told you in person. It's an effect of my condition. I've had years to get used to it, but I still sometimes forget the restrictions on my life. Restrictions, and a strange kind of freedom that comes with them. But before we talk about where I am now, let me tell you how it all began. I love Google. Through it, I have the knowledge of the world at my fingertips. All of the information accumulated by humanity can be found if you know how to use it. Want to know how to bake some delicious chocolate chip cookies? Google it. Want to learn an ancient ritual for summoning the spirits of the dead? Google it. Want to find me, my name, or any evidence that I really exist? Don't bother. No, I'm not a secret government agent who had his presence on the web meticulously scrubbed by geniuses for my own protection. And no, I didn't do it myself or have it done for me due to any affiliation with a criminal organization. It was done involuntarily, and near as I can tell, irreversibly. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Google used to love me back. For years, my website was one of the most trafficked in the world. It was on the first page of search results whenever people were looking for information about controversial topics. Science, religion, politics, and history were my forte. If there was strong disagreement or conspiracy theories surrounding a topic, my website was a top-tier source of information, and people used it in numbers comparable to any 3 mainstream news outlets combined. When there was a story on my site, it would be shared widely through social media and linked to hundreds, sometimes thousands of smaller sites that would use mine as a primary source of information. It was beautiful, magnificent even. I was trusted by all the right people, and I was proud to bursting of what I had accomplished. I was in the elite of the internet, the virtual version of being a champion Olympic athlete, and it was full of crap. I was a troll extraordinaire. I gave the world bad information. I did it on purpose. I reveled in the social chaos that was the result of my magnificent prank on the gullible and ignorant masses searching for confirmation bias and validation of their mistaken or groundless beliefs. I gave them what they wanted. I fed it to them like a parent spooning from a jar into the mouth of a hungry, ever so trusting baby. In exchange, I gained money and fame in equally generous amounts. The great scam artists of history, P.T., Barnum, Charles Ponzi, and their ilk would have envied me if they were alive today. Do you remember how huge the story of Hillary Clinton being outed as a lesbian who lets her husband go, tomcatting around so she can fulfill true carnal desires, was back in the 2008 Democratic presidential primary? No, of course you don't. It was one of my stories, an extraordinary hoax, complete with faked photos that cratered her poll numbers and moved the DNC to use their superdelegates to pave the way for the first interracial American president. And it's as if I never existed. Sure, the effect it had on the world remains intact, but nobody remembers the real reason why. It's as though there is a collective delusion to fill in the blank space where my work once held full credit. And all that remains are rumors of her closeted homosexuality among her political enemies. Perhaps you're familiar with the 9/11 truth movement. I didn't start that one, so you should remember it just fine. Thing is, I'm the one who gave it legs. I was searching the internet for stories for my site. I needed one with enough backing to be believable, but also so unlikely to be true that I could use it to play with people's heads. And I came across this obscure gem, a conspiracy that the US government took down that World Trade Center itself and blamed terrorists so it could start a war for oil that it never claimed as the spoils of war. It was pure gold. Many people credit Alex Jones with popularizing this conspiracy theory. Well, he first learned about it from me, not that he remembers. We were buddies back then. Like me, he never met a crazy conspiracy he didn't like. Unlike me, he actually believed them then, and he believes them now. I mean, seriously, the government is poisoning the water to make the frogs gay. How funny is that? We had so much fun together. I miss him. So how it is then that you have no idea who I am? Google has been working to improve the reliability of its search results practically from the day it launched. Their product may be you, and everything you think is private so that they can sell your life to advertisers. But the lure that gets you to willingly give it to them is all that sweet free information in an easy-to-use, convenient, and reliable search engine that gives you exactly what you want, chief among them being good, reliable information. My website represented the exact opposite of this ideal. Hucksterism was my game, and deceit was my trade. And business was good. Nowadays, making money on a website can be challenging. The price of advertising is lower than it used to be, and people are less prone to clicking though ads. That's where the real money is. You might get a pittance for eyes on, but it's click-throughs that really get you paid. Back when I started, the money flowed like water. If you had a popular website, you could go from a nobody to a millionaire with 300 employees in just a few years if you played your cards right. I never hired anyone. That meant that I was basically chained to my computer every waking hour. But it also meant that I got to keep all of the money I made for myself. Well, after Uncle Sam swooped in to take a grossly unfair portion of the fruits of my labors. Seriously, in what world is it fair to spend 3 to 6 months of your life every year working for free because some government goon is taking your money from you at gunpoint? How is that different from slave labor? But I digress. The point is, I was a one-man operation. Nobody was tied to my business but me. So don't go around trying to figure out if that money I used to have is still tied to my business in any way. I assure you that it is not. I honestly have no idea what happened to my money. Where do millions of dollars go when they don't belong to anyone? Perhaps Google took it. Maybe it was simply sucked into the infinitely hungry black money hole that is the federal government. Maybe it was simply deleted from existence. Our money is mostly digital these days anyway. Erase a bank account. Erase the money. Regardless, my fortune vanished without a trace. Every penny earned over years of endless work gone in the blink of an eye. Google was a multiplied blessing for me. It served both as my primary means of gathering information and as my primary means of spreading my own brand of misinformation. That said, if something isn't on Google, not just buried and hard to locate, but genuinely missing entirely, does it really exist at all? If all of the information in the world, all of the known information, study, events, and general information of human history is online and searchable through Google, what does it mean if it can't be found? And, relevant to my one story, what does it mean that I can't be found? It all happened in an instant, in one of those moments that should be entirely unremarkable, and, in this case, ironically forgettable for you, but never for me. I sat down at my computer one morning, logged in, and opened Google so I could check for anything useful may have come up while I slept. I had every expectation that the same thing would happen that day as had happened every single day for years. It should have perfectly and satisfyingly ordinary with another day of bland but happy research, writing and posting wonderfully deceptive stories for the hungry, gullible masses. Imagine my surprise then, when I opened up my Google homepage and was greeted with the following message: "You have been deleted for intentionally spreading false and misleading information." What? I muttered, mouth agape in confusion and surprise. This isn't April 1st. What kind of joke is this? I navigated to my website to log in and do a little work only to be greeted by the non-existent domain error message. Can't reach that page. Odd. Let me Google it. So I did. I Googled my own website and the search result was fruitless. No matter how I searched, no matter my search terms, I got no results that included my own website, and often I got no results at all. I searched myself and found other randos with the same name. but not the most famous one, me. Frustrated, I went to Twitter to complain to my legions of followers. Every login attempt just got me the failed login, username and password do not match message. I searched my account name without logging in, and there were no results to be found. I went to Facebook with the exact same result. I tried to log into my various email accounts, and they all failed the same way. I attempted to recover my accounts with my usernames and a password reset link texted to my phone, but they all had the same result: incorrect username. I broadened my search for anything I could still log into. World of Warcraft? Gone! Amazon? Gone! YouTube? Gone. Bank accounts, utilities, online subscriptions, credit card accounts, and anything that I could normally access online. Gone, 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 and oh so gone. I ran a virus scan on all of my devices and they came back clean. I repeated the scan with 3 additional antivirus programs, and all came back clean as well. I restarted my computers, phone, and every other net-connected device I owned. When that failed, I tried resetting my computer, only to be completely unable to properly set it up again due to, you guessed it, no Microsoft account. Son of a bitch. I screamed impotently as my computer rejected my login credentials. I pulled out my cell phone to call customer support, dialed the number swiftly and surely, my fingers stabbing the screen with quick, angry jabs. I put the phone to my ear and nothing, absolutely nothing, not even a lousy, "This phone number is no longer in service" recording. Just plain nothing. I tried to open some apps to see if the phone had anything actually working. They all opened, but they all had forgotten me and had asked me to set up a new user account. Damn it! I shrieked as I violently hurled my very expensive iPhone into my equally expensive oversized Ultra HD monitor. They both broke gloriously, bits and pieces flying off in random directions as I growled impatiently through gritted teeth. This is crap, I angrily declared to nobody after I regained a modicum of composure. I'm going to the library. Maybe I can get some work done from their computers while I get this sorted out. I got dressed. Yes, I actually did do most of my work in my underwear and a bathrobe. Yes, I knew it made me a living stereotype, but I was too rich and influential to care. Who was going to see me anyway? I worked alone out of my home office. I grabbed my wallet and keys and hurried out my front door. My next-door neighbor happened to be taking out his trash at the same time. Good morning. Jim! I hurriedly greeted as I rushed to my car. I didn't fully comprehend his response at the time. My mind was wholly preoccupied by my mysterious computer problems. He gave me a confused look, cocking his head to one side and saying nothing as he hesitantly raised his free and gave me a half-hearted wave. Hello. I slid into the driver's seat and slammed the car door shut. I swear, when I find out who's responsible for messing up my computer like this. He's a dead man! I groused as I keyed the ignition. The engine roared to life, and the sound of the powerful motor soothed me slightly. I love my car, and I tried several times to describe it here for you, but apparently that would give you enough information to identify me, so just trust me when I tell you that you'd love to have a car like mine. Sadly, it seems that the page simply will not allow me to commit something that could allow people to pick me out in a crowd to print. Hence, I am reduced to speaking in generalities rather the details of my gorgeous, crazy fast, super sexy car for you so you could form the proper mental picture of this enviable machine. As it is, just imagine whatever car you think is gorgeous, super sexy, and crazy fast. You might even manage to picture mine. I slammed the car in reverse, zipped out into the street without bothering to look. Yes, I know I could have killed someone, but at the moment I didn't really care. Once on the road, I slammed the car in gear, floored the gas, and sped down the street like a 2-ton bullet. Yes, I was driving recklessly and I didn't care. Have you ever been so thoroughly pissed off that you were fine with endangering other people and yourself in your fit of foolish rage? That was me. My world had just been upended, so I honestly didn't care if I upended someone else's world. Misery does love company after all. I roared into the library parking lot in a third of the time it should have taken me to arrive and came to a screeching stop in the handicapped spaces, actually. I double parked. I was going too fast to fully stop in time, and I took out the handicapped sign and put a decent dent in the bumper of my year, make, and model I can't tell you super expensive sports car. The minor miracle of having broken almost every traffic law, including speeding, running stop signs, running red lights, failure to yield, illegal passing on the right, illegal passing in a no-passing zone, and reckless driving without once encountering a cop in the 8-mile drive barely registered in my mind. I fixed my furious glare on the library doors and huffed like an angry bull. I held no appreciation for libraries at the time. They are increasingly obsolete relics of an age from before the internet put all that every library in the world contains and more into our homes, and even into our pockets as smartphones improved. I saw them as enclaves for the old, the poor, and the technologically illiterate. The library was a large, sprawling, two-story affair with blocky construction and lots of windows on such a large lot of land that the utter lack of a useful public space like a playground, public pool, athletic fields, or all three since it had the space was utterly appalling to me. Seriously, if my taxes are being used to maintain the property, the least the people spending my money could do is get the most bang for my buck. I stalked up the sidewalk, violently threw open the glass double doors, and angrily marched up to the librarian. "I need to use a computer," I growled. My demeanor hardly seemed to faze her. A plump, mousy woman in her 50s with long black hair streaked with grey, or rather, grey hair streaked with black. She merely arched one thin eyebrow at me and said, "Okay, let me see your library card." "My library card?" I responded incredulously. "Lady, I haven't been to a library since the last time my mom took me as a kid. I'm only here because my computer got hit with the nastiest, sneakiest virus I've ever seen, and I desperately need to get online so I can handle some business and get my remote service guy to clean up MUPC before I get home." "No problem," she said with absolutely no concern whatsoever for the massive info dump I just inflicted upon her. "Just fill out this form and I'll get you a library card in just a few minutes. And then you can use the computer. Just stay off those porn sites unless you want to give our computers the same virus yours has. Also, it will get your computer privileges permanently revoked." She slid a stack of 3 blank forms and a pen across the desk to me. "We're not too busy right now, so you can go ahead and fill the application out right here." She turned away and did whatever it is that bored librarians do on her computer while I filled out the forms. "Done," I declared after a couple minutes of furiously jotting down the required information. "Can we please hurry?" I asked as I handed her the completed forms. "This won't take long," she promised. She checked the forms, and a confused, annoyed expression clouded her features. "Is this a joke?" she demanded as she handed the papers back to me. "These forms are blank." "Bullshit," I replied, annoyed at her sick sense of humor. "I just filled them out. You saw me do it." I looked down at the forms in my hands. To my utter surprise, the top form was completely blank, as if I had never touched pen to paper. I frantically spread them all out on the desk so I could see them all at once. They were all blank. "That's..." I stammered. Surprising. I could have sworn. I'm sure I... Whatever. I'll do it again." "Do you need help filling them out?" she asked with a tone that practically screamed, "Say yes and prove you're a moron. Come on, do it." "No," I murmured. "Just give me a few minutes." Had I really made some incredibly stupid mistake in my haste? I checked my pen. The ballpoint was retracted, but I was sure I'd had it out while I was filling out the forms. I was sure I'd had it out while I was writing. I was sure that I saw ink flowing across the page as I worked. I was severely stressed. Was it possible that I never even had the point out and just scratched blank lines of nothing on the pages? Yes, that had to be it. I clicked the top of the pen slowly and deliberately. The point came out and stuck firmly in place with a satisfying click. I put the pen to paper and took a few test strokes by slowly writing down my first name. Black ink flowed out onto the page, and my name appeared on the white paper in solid black lines. I continued this way all the way through to the end. "Okay, done," I declared as I drew the final letter on the final page. "Now can I please get my library card so I can use the computer?" The librarian picked up the forms, looked at them, then set them down and fixed me with an angry glare. "This isn't funny, young man," she scolded. "Now get out of here and take whatever is recording this lame prank with you." "What?" I asked, confused. "This," she snapped as she forcefully thrust the papers back at me and shook them under my nose before shoving them into my hands. I looked at the newly crumpled papers, and my eyes grew wide with shock. "This can't be," I mouthed breathlessly. The pages were blank. Every line that I had just filled out in heavy block lettering was as clean and white as newly fallen snow. There weren't even the impressions that pressing my pen into the paper should have left, even if I hadn't clearly seen the black ink pour out and affix itself to the paper as I wrote. "This can't be," I repeated. "It makes no sense." "Oh, it makes perfect sense," the librarian retorted. "You're screwing with me, and it's not funny. Now get out." "Look, I'm not a crier. I didn't cry when Old Yellow died. I didn't cry at the end of Where the Red Fern Grows. I didn't even cry when my own pets died. Not ever, including as a kid. My parents are alive and well, as is my brother, and I was never close to our extended family, so I had never felt loss on that level. But just then, looking at those forms, I broke down. "What are you doing?" The librarian went from angry to concerned the moment I shed my first tear. "I don't get it," I blubbered. "All I want to do is check the internet, and I can't even fill these forms out. What's wrong with me? What's happening to me?" The librarian looked like she genuinely felt my pain. Women are amazing that way, able to feel others' emotions almost as if they were their own. It's called empathy, and they have it in buckets. "Tell you what," she said tenderly, "I'll log you in with my credentials. Do you promise not to access any porn, drug, or anything that's against our use policy?" "Yes," I nodded, rubbing my eyes dry with the back of my hand. "I really do need to look a few things up. I promise it's all safe for work." She led me to the computer lab and logged me in as a guest under her credentials. I thanked her profusely, sat down, and got to work. I checked my website. Gone. I checked my social media. Gone. I checked my email addresses and commerce accounts. All gone. Then I looked myself up using every combination of data points that I could think of. I was famous. I was in the news. I was practically a household name. Nothing. Defeated. I logged out of the computer and pushed my chair away from the little cubicle. I was emotionally exhausted without the energy to be even a little mad anymore. My head hung low. I waved dejectedly at the librarian on my way out and thanked her again on my way out. She gave a confused look and asked, "Thanks? For what?" I shook my head, taking a moment to appreciate her humility that made he see the great favor she did for me as nothing. Then I turned around and dejectedly walked out the door into my car. There was a parking ticket on my windshield. I didn't care. I left it where it was as I unlocked the doors, got in, and fired up the engine. I slumped in my seat, leaned my head back, and sighed heavily, not knowing what was happening or why. All I knew was that my life as I knew was almost certainly over, taken from me as surely as if I had never existed, and I had no idea how I was going to get it back. Heading home, I was just as dangerous behind the wheel as I had been going to the library, but in a different way, where once I had been angry and aggressive. Now I was distracted and depressed. So, of course, I ran a stop sign. I was barely through the intersection when the cop car on the cross street pulled out behind me and lit up like a child's toy. What else could I do? I was fairly caught, so I pulled over. "License and registration," the cop said in a firm but bored tone of voice. "Okay, officer," I replied humbly. I reached into the glove box and pulled out the envelope that held my insurance and car registration and handed it to the office before taking out my wallet. "What the?" I gasped when I saw the empty space where my driver's license always resided. I showed the policeman my deficient wallet and pointed at the empty window slot. "I'm sorry, I don't seem to have my license right now. I honestly don't know where it could be." "Wait here," the officer firmly ordered before returning to his squad car. After what felt like an eternity, the officer returned, and this time I noticed that he had his hand on the hilt of his gun, and the holster was unbuckled. "Get out of the car," he barked. I was confused. "Excuse me?"
"What?"
I blurted. "Get out of the car now," he repeated, truly clueless about the situation. I did as ordered, then asked, "Okay, why?" "Now turn and place your hands on the hood of the vehicle," he interrupted. Again, I did as I was told. Nobody can ever say that my parents didn't teach me to respect officers of the law, or the fact that resisting them is a great way to get beaten or shot. The officer frisked me, found nothing, then handcuffed me. "The envelope you handed me was empty. I ran your plates and they aren't on file, which makes them ghost plates. This vehicle also matches the description of one stolen from the dealership 18 months ago, and I'm betting that the VIN on this car is a match for the stolen one." "There must be some mistake," I protested. "I bought this car with cash. Well, a check, so that there would be a paper trail to prove the purchase. But I paid for it." "Save it for the judge," he mocked. "I've heard that one before." I was roughly shoved into the back seat of the squad car. I watched and listened as the officer relayed the vehicle identification number to the precinct and waited entirely too long for the results. "It's a match," came the reply. The voice was female, but in no way sexy. It sounded like she'd been smoking razor blades without a filter for the last 30 years. What came next was every cop show cliché that ever existed. I was arrested, read my rights, booked, fingerprinted, mugshot, charged, and tossed into a communal jail cell with a bunch of petty criminals, addicts, and at least one homeless man in desperate need of a very long, very hot shower. The worst part was the body cavity search. If I had to get a gloved finger up my rear, the least they could have done was have a good-looking woman do it, rather than the ham-fisted brute of a man. I was left waiting in there forever. Nobody fetched me for interrogation. No lawyer came to represent me. It was as if the police simply forgot I existed. I'd never been to jail before. Hell, I'd never even seen the inside of a police station before. My entire image of jail was formed by television and movies. I fully expected to be surrounded by dozens of nefarious criminals who all know that I had a purty mouth. Not true. The real dangerous ones were segregated from the ordinary criminals, and I was with a pretty chill group. Sure, some of them looked rough, and there was the homeless man who smelled like he hadn't had a shower in a decade, but most were just ordinary people you wouldn't look twice at if you saw them on the street, who may or may not have done something illegal and were just waiting for bail, and more than a few of them were actually pretty cool. The hours passed. People came and went. Then lunchtime arrived. "Chow time, jailbirds," a young male officer with brown hair and impeccable grooming called out as he rolled a cart filled with bagged lunches into the hallway. The bags were numbered by cell, and there were exactly as many meals as there were inmates in that cell. All was well until he got to my cell. Never having been locked up before, and more preoccupied with the mystery of my car falsely coming up as stolen on top of my online existence, vanishing without a trace. I found myself at the back of the line. When it was my turn to get my food, the officer gave me a puzzled look. "I'm sorry," he apologized. "It looks like we miscounted the meals. I'll fetch you a meal as soon as I'm done passing the rest of these out." "Okay." I sighed in frustration. What's one more inconvenience in a disaster of a day like this anyway? I sat down on the bench nearest the cell door and waited as everyone else in the cell block got their food. "I'll be right back," the officer promised as he wheeled the empty cart past my cell. I gave him an insincere smile and a half-hearted wave as he exited the cell block and waited for him to come back with my lunch. And waited. And waited. And waited. What the hell? I grumbled after an hour had passed. That damn cop lied to me. My stomach gurgled loudly as if to punctuate my irritated claim. The homeless man approached me on unsteady feet. Holding out his brown bag, he said, "Take this." I didn't finish mine. I was genuinely shocked by the offer. "I can't," I began to protest. He cut me off. "I know what it's like to be ignored, forgotten and hungry. Please, take it." "Thank you," I said, as I gratefully took the food, no longer caring about the stench that enveloped him like a billowing cloak. Say what you will about the homeless. Dismiss them as drunks, druggies and lunatics if you want to, but they have enormous empathy for the suffering of others. There's something about life being genuinely hard, even out of control, that instills this in them. Most of them will give you the shirt off their back, while someone who's fully self-absorbed in their comparatively minor problems, as they fail to appreciate their comfy little world, will walk right on by without so much as looking at you. That's why I go out my way to be good to the homeless, as opposed to the normies who I, well, genuinely don't care for anymore. We spoke while I ate, and long after until dinner time. I told him my story, and he seemed to believe me with some obvious effort. He told me his story too. I'll call him Tom here. That's not his real name, but if I did violate his privacy, he wouldn't remember me anyway, so Tom it is. He was an Iraq war veteran. Before that, he was happy. He was physically and mentally strong. He had a master's degree in accounting and joined the army as an infantry officer to get his student loans repaid. He discovered that he loved the military and resolved to stay in beyond his initial 6-year commitment. He married a beautiful woman. He made captain in just 3 years. Then the war started. You all know how it went at first. The nation was reeling and out for blood, justifiably so, but in our zealous desire for revenge, we made mistakes. It would be easy to blame the politicians for everything, but the truth is that they only did what the voters demanded of them, and many who resisted paid for it with their careers. That's the bargain you make to be in politics after all. Tom's unit was deployed to Afghanistan, where all went reasonably well, all things considered at the time. Then they were redeployed to Iraq, instead of coming home when their tour was over. The fighting was easy at first, then became interminable and sneaky, as the local zealots, with foreign backing and support, decided to start an insurgency that kept us bogged in that quagmire for far too long. Insurgents caused many casualties in his unit, and as his deployment got extended many times, the stress, pain, and losses of a prolonged war got to him. The final straw was when he finally returned home, a major's leaf freshly pinned on his collar, only to discover that his wife, that he hadn't seen for over 2 years, was pregnant with a 6-month-old baby in her arms. Obviously, neither child was his, and she had divorce papers waiting for him to sign on the kitchen table. Broken, he signed them without reading them, went to the drugstore, bought a toxic mix of over-the-counter drugs, and downed them all right in front of the cashier. Naturally, she called 911. He got medical intervention, stomach pumped and all. Then he spent a month involuntarily committed to a mental hospital. Once he was released, he reported to his commander only to find that he was being discharged for mental health with a disability rating for severe PTSD. That was the end of his life as he knew it. He began to disregard himself as he spent his entire VA check on booze every month. He ended up homeless, broken, and abandoned, with nothing but a few taxpayer dollars every month and a bottle of liquor to keep him company. His story still breaks my heart. What's left of it anyway. Tom, if you're reading this and recognize your story, I genuinely hope that you got the help you need and have been able to rebuild your life. You deserve happiness. Rebuilding my own life has proved to be impossible. Dinner came, and the same officer who forgot to bring my lunch was serving dinner. "You jerk!" I yelled when I saw him. "You promised you'd bring me lunch, then left me to starve." The officer scowled at me. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "Don't play stupid with me," I shrieked. "This is police brutality, or prisoner neglect, or whatever that crime is called." The officer spoke into his radio. "We have a disruptive prisoner in cell 3, he said in an official tone. Looking right at me, he stated, "I've never seen this guy before." That set off my cellmates. They all started talking over each other as they verified my side of the story. They accused him of tormenting prisoners for fun. One called him a racist, even thought the cop's skin color is as white as mine. I guess telling you my race is general enough. It's not like anyone can pick me out of lineup with that info after all. Still, I'm mildly surprised that I'm allowed to tell you even that much about me. Several other cops showed up brandishing batons and tasers. They barked orders at us, and everyone backed away from the bars before one keyed the door and opened it. 2 large officers manhandled and cuffed me before dragging me out of the cell. The one with the keys closed the door and locked it behind us. "Who is this guy anyway?" the cop with the meal cart asked as I was being hauled away. "No idea," replied one of my escorts, a fit, compact woman with bleached blonde hair. "Nobody remembers bringing him in. Booking is looking him up now." "I want a lawyer," I demanded. "This is bullshit. Give me a lawyer." My police escort ignored my protests as they dragged me to an interrogation room and unceremoniously dumped me into the chair.
The lady cop's radio crackled. "We can't find a record on this guy. His file must have been misplaced. No idea why he's not in the computer either."
"You wait here while we find your file," the lady cop ordered. "Don't go forgetting about me," I replied sarcastically. "And where's my damn dinner?" "You get fed when we know who you are and why you're here," she snapped back. I laughed. "My name is..." I told her my name. I can speak it freely, even if it won't take to print no matter how many times I type it out. "And I'm here because one of you idiot cops accused me of stealing my own car that I paid for in full." I glared at them both. "Now can I go home, or are we going to play the bureaucracy game?" One of the male cops glared back at me. "We're going to find your file and ID you before we do anything. We never take a perp at his word. We're not stupid." They both left the room and closed it over my loud stream of vile invectives. I'd never had a problem with the cops before. They do perform a vital service, even if they do it imperfectly, but everything about that situation was bullshit. I was rightfully pissed, and I felt justified showing it. I kept yelling at the closed door for a while before giving up. I looked around the room. It was bare and sterile, with one table and 2 chairs placed on either side of it. There was a one-way mirror in the wall, a door, and a camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. The red recording light was not on. I assume that's because they only use it during active interrogations. I settled in and waited for the cops to return with my file and my dinner. And waited, and waited, and waited for hours upon hours. Being all alone with nothing but your own thoughts can be a good thing. Hell, it can be downright therapeutic, giving you a chance to work through your troubles or clear your mind so you can focus on a creative task or puzzle. It's not a good thing when you're enraged and obsessed. In that case, you ruminate, marinating in a vicious circle of negativity that leaves you stewing over your situation until you can't take it anymore and you explode. I think you know which one of these cases describes mine. "This is bullshit!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, violently rising to my feet, banging my knees against the table in the process. I wheeled around and kicked the chair away from me with all my rage. It flew across the small room and banged against the wall. The pain in my shin assured me that my outburst would leave me with a nasty bruise to remember it by. I pounded on the door with both of my cuffed fists. "Let me out of here, you bastards," I screamed. "I've been stuck in here all night. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, and I need to pee, damn it." There was no response, but I didn't give up. I kept pounding on the door and screaming. It felt like I was at it forever. My fists were bruised. My voice went hoarse. Finally, someone opened the door. It was the lady officer who had been part of my escort to this damnable pit. "It's about damn time," I spat. "How could you stick me in here and just abandon me like that?" Next thing I knew, I felt a massive jolt of electricity surge into my body, and I went to the floor in a twitching heap. The lady cop keyed her radio on. "This is Officer Valdez," she said in an official tone. "Someone's in interrogation room 2. I had to subdue him. This room is supposed to be empty. Do we have an ID on someone being put in here?" "Negative," came the reply. "That room hasn't been used since the double homicide last week." "Then who is the prisoner in it right now?" she asked her radio. "You bitch," I managed to spit out. "You tossed Maya's sin here yourself." She looked at me with pure scorn. "No," she replied coldly. "I'd remember you if I had." Story 2. I witnessed the power of a wish, and it's began to destroy reality. Everyone gets one single wish in their lifetime. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. Every single human being is born with one wish destined to be granted. I've wished for $1 million countless times and got nothing. This is bullshit, you might think. But listen, don't call me a liar. I have no reason to lie to you, and you have no reason to distrust me. Hear me out, and maybe you can save someone else's wish. Maybe you can give them the chance to do it right. Maybe you can stop them from making the same stupid mistake that I did. Maybe you can save them. But I digress. You probably wasted your wish when you were still a kid. We wish for so many things as children. I wish my tummy didn't hurt. I wish we could have cake for dinner. I wish I didn't have to take a bath tonight. I wish I didn't have to go to school tomorrow. I wish my crush would talk to me. I wish. And at some point, amidst all this wishing, your wish gets spent. But on rare occasions, a wish waits until adulthood. Usually it's wasted on something mundane, as adults have learned to temper their expectations, to cope with the crushing weight of our standard reality. I witnessed one such wish being granted. It was so stupid, such a waste. When I was in my mid-20s, I moved to a new town with my now ex-partner. We started in a little rental, just the two of us. We both landed jobs at a local pizza place, and given our experience, I quickly rose to a lead delivery position while my partner became the GM protege. We worked hard, made good friends, and eventually moved in with our new GM. Initially, we were waiting for his lease to expire or to find someone to sublease his apartment. The managers complained about the difficulty of finding renters, but they were just old and didn't know that people don't read newspaper ads anymore. I posted on Facebook and had the apartment subleased that same week. During that week, the three of us applied and got approved for a nice 2-bedroom, 1-bath just down the street from work. We moved in by the end of the week. While moving in, we realized we needed a microwave, among other essentials. This is important. By the end of the following week, we had everything unpacked. We bought a little blue microwave from Walmart and settled in. We developed routines, discovered our likes and dislikes about the apartment, and our quirks living together. Nothing major, just thin walls and our bedroom sharing a wall with the bathroom where our GM had some gut issues. The point is, we were all comfortable and familiar with the house when the wish was granted. One day, my partner and I were standing in the kitchen, talking about nothing in particular. Let me give you the layout of the kitchen. It was simple, a walkway ending in a pantry. On the left side was a newer stainless steel fridge, standard white counters, overhead freshly painted cabinetry, and under-counter storage. The oven was at the far end, maybe 10 feet away. On the right side were the same white countertops and freshly painted light grey cabinets. The key differences, starting closest to the entrance of the kitchen, was our little blue microwave, then some counter space, then our double basin sink, and next to that, under the countertop, was our dishwasher. A small kitchen, impossible to miss something big and obvious, especially after almost 2 weeks of living there. So my partner and I are chatting, and I commented on how the little blue microwave didn't fit with the rest of the muted kitchen aesthetic. My partner agreed, then looked around and pointed to the overhead cabinets between the fridge and stove and said, "I wish we had a microwave up there. I can't even reach those cabinets." I agreed that it would be neat, and then turned away from the kitchen. My partner looked down at their phone. When I looked back, it felt like I short-circuited. Right there, in the exact spot my partner had wished for, was a perfectly installed brand new microwave. It even sat recessed in custom cabinetry. Obviously, this blew our minds. The first thing I did was call our roommate. They were 6.5 feet tall and would have noticed a microwave in those cabinets. They said, "No, our microwave is on the counter." I explained that we now had a whole microwave installed in custom cabinetry. Later, when they got home, they confirmed the microwave had not been there when they left for work, as they used that space to keep dog treats. The treats were moved to an adjacent cabinet that was unused until then. I felt like I had just witnessed real magic, proof of something cosmic. But dread washed over me when I realized that this was their once-in-a-lifetime wish. That was it. $1 quadrillion, the cure for cancer, ending world hunger? No. A raise at work? A new car? A better life situation? No. A good day? Meeting a famous person? Finding a sugar daddy? No. A microwave installed in the cabinets of a rental we would move out of in 5 months. Wish. Fucking. Granted. Some years ago, I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole edifice that I had subsequently based on them. I realized that it was necessary, once in the course of my life, to demolish everything completely and start again right from the foundations if I wanted to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last. René Descartes. Now that you understand how easy it is to utterly waste a wish, take a moment to actually think about it. Can you remember when you used your wish? Can you remember that time you received exactly what you wished for, no matter how minuscule and frivolous it may have been? Can you recall it? Do you remember it? I can recall mine with enough clarity that the moment seems to have more reality carved into it than our current reality does. That moment is more real than any other moment that has come before or after. That moment is the moment that the entire world began to sunder and devolve. It's the moment that I tipped the scales against our entire collective future. It's a moment that came about in a fit of lunacy and had consequences to match. It was a sunny day, the kind that makes you want to believe in good things. The air was crisp and fresh. It was alive and serene. But it was also the day that shattered my life and left me a broken shell of who I once was. It was the day that hemorrhaged the birth of the end. I remember it vividly, every detail etched into my mind, resonating like the migraines of some late-stage brain tumor. I was driving back from the store, just a quick run to grab some essentials. The streets were bustling with life, people going about their day, children playing, families enjoying their time together. I was fiddling with the radio, trying to find a good station, when I heard a loud horn and the screech of tires. I looked up, just in time to see a car swerving out of my way. I had drifted into oncoming traffic. I reacted on instinct, jerking the wheel to the left, but it was too late. My car collided with the other vehicle with a sickening crunch, metal twisting and glass shattering. The airbags deployed as the back of my car lifted from the earth. The sudden exchange of forces left me breathless. My body felt as though it could tear itself in half. I existed, momentarily, in a total dualism. The inner me was thrust forward, consciousness in tow, while the outer me was left to absorb laws of physics I'd have otherwise forgotten existed. I doubt René Descartes had to experience a crash to develop his philosophy, but I do wonder sometimes what it was that caused great philosophers to develop their ideas. What was the motivation? It is not enough to have a good mind. The main thing is to use it well. René Descartes. I became obsessed with the notion that there was some way to fix it, some way to atone. I would spend hours poring over books, articles, anything that might offer a glimmer of hope. I started to believe in things I had never considered before. Magic, miracles, anything that could undo my mistake. It was a delusion, a desperate grasp at something to hold on to as my sanity slipped through my fingers. The thinking of the mind is twofold, understanding and willing. René Descartes. And then, one night, in the depths of my anguish, that incident with the microwave crawled forth from the unseen corners of my mind. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind howling around me, the darkness pressing in. I felt like I was on the edge of the world, teetering on the brink of oblivion. So I made my wish. In a moment of utter despair, I whispered my wish into the night, my voice breaking with the weight of my sorrow. I wish I could undo it all. I wish I could take it back. I wish. I pounded my balled fists against my head as the tears descended haphazardly, caught in the vice-like grips of gravity. The words spilled out of me, a deluge of pain and desperation. I knew it was foolish, knew it was a last, desperate act of a broken mind. But I didn't care. I just wanted the pain to stop, to find some way to escape the endless torment. I was so tired of that lunacy. I was so exhausted from the ceaseless screaming in my own mind. As I uttered my wish, a strange sensation washed over me, a warmth that seemed to envelop my entire being. For the briefest of moments, I felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark in the darkness. But as the warmth faded, I realized that my wish had been granted in the worst possible way. But I cannot forget that at other times I have been deceived in sleep by similar illusions. And, attentively considering those cases, I perceive so clearly that there exist no certain marks by which the state of waking can ever be distinguished from sleep, that I feel greatly astonished, and in amazement I almost persuade myself that I am now dreaming. René Descartes. I am stalling to continue. This is difficult to recount. I feel as though I am still standing there, like it's still the moment I realize what happened. Before I knew it, I stumbled out of my car, dazed and disoriented, the smell of burning rubber and gasoline filling the air. The scene around me was chaotic. People were screaming, running, some towards the wreckage, other away. I followed their gaze and saw the other car, a family sedan, crumpled against a tree. The front was smashed in, the hood crumpled like an accordion. And then I saw them. Two small bodies, motionless in the back seat, and a man slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling down his face. My heart sank. I rushed over, screaming for someone to call 911, my hands trembling as I tried to open the door. I pried and pried, but the handle gave no relief to the firm fixation of the door. A woman from the nearby house came running out, her face pale with shock. She came running towards me with a hammer and an outdated fire extinguisher from her kitchen. She helped me pry the door open after the fire extinguisher failed to activate, but it was too late. The children, a boy and a girl, couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, were gone. Their father, too, had succumbed to his injuries by the time the paramedics arrived. The woman, Emily Hyler, was panting heavily beside me, still unaware of the tragic connection she had to the victims. Her focus was on assisting me, her hands working frantically to help extricate the bodies. It was only after a brief moment of observation that she glanced inside the car and recognized the small, lifeless forms of her children and the familiar face of her husband. Emily's face contorted in horror as the realization hit her. A maddening sorrow overtook her, and she let out a piercing scream that cut through the air, a sound filled with unimaginable, twisted horror. She fell to her knees beside the wreckage, now muted, her body racked with pain as she held the lifeless hand of her son, which was resting on the car door's window frame, just barely long enough to reach beyond the confines. Her silence echoed louder than that of any sound I've heard before or since. A haunting stain of the irreparable damage caused in that single, devastating moment. Obituary for Cameron Hillo. Cameron Hillo, August 23rd, 1986, June 20th, 2023. Cameron Hillo, age 37, passed away on June 20th, 2023, in a tragic car accident alongside his beloved children, Ryan and Olivia. Born on August 23rd, 1986, Cameron was a dedicated husband, father, and friend whose kindness and generosity touched the lives of many. Cameron worked as an engineer and was known for his dedication and hard work. Outside of his professional life, he was a passionate supporter of his children's activities and a pillar of strength for his family. He enjoyed outdoor activities, building model airplanes, and spending quality time with his family. Cameron leaves behind his loving wife, Emily Hillo, his parents, John and Susan Hillo, his in-laws, Peter and Linda Anderson, and numerous relatives and friends who will forever remember his loving nature and unwavering support. A memorial service to honor the lives of Cameron, Ryan, and Olivia will be held at Grace Community Church on June 28, 2023, at 10 a.m. In lieu of flowers, the family kindly requests donations to be made to support causes Cameron cared about, including children's education and road safety awareness. Obituary for Ryan Hillo. Ryan Hillo, October 14th, 2017, June 20th, 2023. Ryan Hillo, aged 6, passed away tragically on June 20th, 2023, in a car accident. Ryan was a bright and joyful child who brought immense happiness to everyone around him. Born on October 14th, 2017, he had a spirit that was as curious as it was kind. Ryan loved dinosaurs, soccer, and spending time with his family. His infectious laughter and boundless energy were a source of light for his parents, Cameron and Emily, and his little sister, Olivia. He was a student at Sunshine Elementary School, where his teachers and friends adored his enthusiasm and big heart. Ryan is survived by his loving mother, Emily Hillo, his grandparents, John and Susan Hillo, and Peter and Linda Anderson, and numerous aunts, uncles, and cousins who will miss him dearly. A joint memorial service will be held to celebrate the lives of Ryan, Olivia, and Cameron at Grace Community Church on June 28, 2023, at 10 a.m. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations be made to a children's charity of your choice in Ryan's memory. Obituary for Olivia Hillo. Olivia Hillo, December 2nd, 2019, June 20th, 2023. Olivia Hillo, aged 4, passed away alongside her brother and father on June 20th, 2023, in a car accident. Born on December 2nd, 2019, Olivia was a sweet and loving child who filled her home with joy and laughter. Olivia's favorite things included her stuffed animals, princess dresses, and reading scary bedtime stories with her parents. She adored her older brother Ryan and was his constant companion in their playful adventures. Her bright smile and gentle nature will be deeply missed by her mother, Emily, and everyone who knew her. She is survived by her devoted mother, Emily Hillo, her grandparents, John and Susan Hillo, and Peter and Linda Anderson, and a large extended family who cherished her deeply. A joint memorial service for Olivia, her brother Ryan, and their father Cameron will be held at Grace Community Church on June 28, 2023 at 10 a.m. The family appreciates donations to children's organizations in memory of Olivia. The weeks following the accident dissolved into a haze of police reports, court appearances, and sleepless nights. Each day bled into the next, an endless cycle of torment and guilt that gnawed at my sanity. The weight of the children's deaths and their fathers was a constant, crushing burden on my chest, suffocating me with every breath. I was haunted by their faces, their innocent smiles forever lost because of my carelessness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, lifeless, broken bodies in the wreckage. The screams of their mother echoed in my mind, a symphony of grief that I couldn't silence. I stopped eating, the thought of food repulsive. My stomach churned with self-loathing, a black pit of despair that swallowed any semblance of normalcy. Sleep became a distant memory. When I did manage to drift off, nightmares consumed me. I would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, my own screams echoing in the darkness. The bed felt like a coffin, the walls of my room closing in on me, trapping me with my guilt. I wandered through my days in a daze, a ghost of my former self, barely able to function. I avoided everyone. My partner, my friends, my family, I pushed them all away. I couldn't bear their pity, their concern. I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve anything but this relentless, all-consuming agony. My mind spiraled further into darkness, each thought a dagger, each memory a poison. I became obsessed with the accident, replaying it over and over in my head, trying to find some way to change it, some way to atone. I would sit in my car, parked at the scene of the crash, for hours on end. I would trace the tire marks on the pavement, staring at the tree where the other car had crashed, willing myself to see something different, something that would make it all make sense. But there was nothing, just the cold, hard reality of my mistake. My partner tried to help, tried to pull me back from the brink, but I lashed out, my anger and frustration spilling over. I smashed things, yelled, sobbed uncontrollably. I became a stranger. A monster had come to inhabit the shell of me that was created the moment I ended their lives. I could see the fear in their eyes, the way they flinched when I got too close. It only made me hate myself more. I started drinking, trying to drown the voices in my head, trying to numb the pain. But it only made things worse. The alcohol burned like fire, turning my insides to a moldering ash. But the guilt remained fireproof. It couldn't silence the screams or erase the images that danced through my mind. It only made me sink deeper into the abyss. One night, I found myself standing on a bridge, staring down at the black water below. The wind whipped around me, cold and biting, but I felt nothing. I wanted to jump, to end it all, to escape this torment. But I was too much of a coward. I couldn't even do that right. Dubium sapientiae initium. Translated to English, doubt is the origin of wisdom. René Descartes. I stumbled home, my thoughts a jumbled mess of despair and rage. I punched the walls, screaming at the top of my lungs, cursing the universe, cursing myself. I tore at my hair, clawed at my skin, anything to make the pain stop. But it wouldn't. It never would. I became fixated on the idea of making a wish. It was all I could think about. I knew it was crazy, knew it was a desperate, foolish hope, but I couldn't let it go. I spent hours researching, reading about ancient rituals, trying to find some way to make it real. I was losing my grip on reality, my mind fracturing under the weight of my guilt and grief. I would stand in front of the mirror, whispering my wish over and over like a mantra. I wish I could undo it. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could save them. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and haunted, a stranger wearing my face. I was losing myself, slipping away into madness. The world around me became distorted, unreal. I would see things out of the corner of my eye, shadows moving, faces in the darkness. I heard whispers, voices that weren't there, mocking me, taunting me. I was unraveling, my mind a shattered mosaic of fear and regret. Story 3. An investigation into think tech. A cry for help. This may not be reality. I may be posting this to the abyss or not at all. Is this a cry for help or all part of a greater plan larger than I can comprehend? My mind is rattled. It has been undone. This world is built on secrets, and I was one of the few who made a living uncovering them. My name is irrelevant now, but for years I have been a private investigator, priding myself on discretion and efficiency. I have lived a secluded life. The connections I have made have been fleeting at best. It's easy to be pessimistic and untrustworthy of people with what I have seen and uncovered in my time. Nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare I stumbled into at ThinkTech. As I try to piece together the fragments of my memory, I can't shake the feeling that some of what I remember might not be my own. ThinkTech stood as a fortress of innovation, its public face a beacon of hope for Alzheimer's and dementia patients, commissioned by an anonymous employer. My mission was to delve into their brain imaging and altering technology. The deeper I dug, the more sinister the rumors became. Whispers of mind control, secret experiments, and people who vanished without a trace. I knew I needed to get in, to truly uncover their secrets. My entry into ThinkTech was facilitated not by subterfuge, but an invitation under the guise of a journalist, an aspiring writer in the medical technology field ready to sing ThinkTech's praises. Of course, this would be of interest to the shareholders. The facility was a shrine to ThinkTech's triumphs, with portraits of beaming scientists and heartfelt accounts of miraculous recoveries. Yet, there was something off in the way the staff moved and interacted, an undercurrent of dread that intuition whispered to me. The hallways didn't evoke a feeling of positivity or optimism from patients being treated, just a feeling that this was all a mere plastic facade ready to be torn down, exposing the hidden truths. Staff continued to move in a hush-hush manner, avoiding my gaze as I was shown around the sterile facility. In my research, Dr. Emily Carter emerged as a person of interest, a neuroscientist celebrated for her breakthroughs, yet enshrouded in mystery. No backstory, no origin, as if she appeared out of thin air. It took some digging, but I discovered she was deeply involved in classified projects. I knew I needed to talk to her, try and get her to reveal things not known. As I was being shown around the facility, I was introduced to a few of the scientists working on the many projects under ThinkTech's umbrella. Amongst them, Dr. Emily Carter. For such a decorated scientist, she was very quiet and subdued. She was successfully avoiding my not-so-subtle gaze, and my attempts to grab her attention were proving futile, pulling myself away from the obviously meticulously planned PR spiel of the numerous scientists. I walked towards Dr. Carter. Before I could get a word out, her eyes darted to the corners of the room, pointing out the multitude of cameras following everyone's every move. It was clear that I wouldn't be able to get any information out of her here. I extended a handshake and smiled. She reciprocated the action. With a bead of sweat appearing in her forehead, she uttered the words, "Hillside View," after which she turned and left. I was taken aback at first, caught off guard, confused. When I started to ponder on the words, "Hillside View," I was reminded of a case of mine from many years ago, of an insurance scam gone wrong. A hotel was burnt down with families stuck inside. The owner of the hotel couldn't afford to keep the hotel in good condition. Its floors warped and twisted, hallways in various states of disrepair. He burnt it down to get a new start, one that never came. All that is left of the Hillside View Hotel is a charred mass of wood and bricks. The doorway to the lobby still stands, almost in defiance of what the owner chose to do. What could Dr. Carter possibly have meant by this? Was it linked to ThinkTech? Was it a warning? Could it possibly be an opportunity to meet? Hoping it was the latter, I knew I needed to pay the Hillside View Hotel a visit. I pulled up to the hotel in my car. It appeared dark, a black mass imposing against the already night sky. I sat in my car wondering why I was here. How did Dr. Carter know this place was linked to me? How was she able to see through my journalist identity? Before I could comprehend what was happening, a shrouded figure opened my car's back door, sat down and closed the door behind them. I didn't dare look back. Not wanting to catch a bullet to the head, I waited. I waited for the figure to speak, to shed some light on my current situation. I waited. Looking in the rear view, I caught a glimpse of their silhouette, appearing almost familiar but shrouded in darkness. "You don't know what you're getting into," she whispered. "You don't know how far this goes. You might not come back," a tremble in her voice. Extending out of the dark, a hand appeared, holding out a keycard and an address. It appeared glinting in the moonlight, a gateway to the next chapter. I took the items and inspected them. Before I could say anything, the figure was gone, fleeing into the night. I debated on what my next move should be, pondering my safety. However, my drive to seek out the unknown forever pulls me deeper into the darkness. Following the address, it brought me to some woods on the outskirts of the city, illuminated only by the glow of the night sky. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, guiding my car deeper into the dense woods, not knowing what lied ahead. The trees loomed like sentinels, their gnarled branches intertwining above to form a claustrophobic canopy that blotted out what little light there was. The air grew heavier, and the forest seemed to swallow the gravel road, each turn leading me further from the world I knew. The address scribbled on a piece of paper sat on the passenger seat, a cryptic beacon given to me by a shrouded figure outside a part of my career from many years ago. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was driving into a trap, the sinister atmosphere mirroring a dark chapter from my past. Years ago, I had navigated through a different kind of darkness. I spiraled into a void where the days blurred together in a haze of grief and self-destruction. I repressed the source of this pain to allow me to keep going, to allow me to uncover the treachery of the world as repentance for my previous lack of action. The suffocating forest now felt like an echo of those days, each tree a reminder of the walls I had built around myself. I feel now a familiar sense of dread, an abyss threatening to engulf me. The memories of sleepless nights and relentless self-reproach surged back with every mile, intertwining with the present danger. Yet, just as I clawed his way out of that personal hell, I knew I had to confront whatever lay ahead, hoping this journey into the shadows would bring me one step closer to salvation. As I emerged into the forest clearing, the sight before me was nothing short of surreal. In the midst of the dense, wild underbrush and towering trees, a solitary door stood erect, untouched by time or nature. The clearing itself was unnaturally circular, the surrounding trees bending away as if repelled by some unseen force emanating from the door. There were small walls either side, indication of a staircase being just beyond the door, its surface polished and pristine, unnaturally so. The door's presence was profoundly eerie, a stark contrast to the raw, untamed forest. It stood as an anomaly, an element so out of place that it twisted the fabric of reality around it. A cold breeze whispered through the clearing, rustling leaves and carrying with it a faint, almost inaudible hum that set me on edge. The door's handle gleamed, seemingly inviting, yet menacing. I felt a chill creep up my spine, as if the very air around him held its breath, waiting for him to make a move. Watching, every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but an inexplicable pull drew me closer, compelling me to face whatever mystery lay beyond the uncanny threshold. Inside the door was a long, narrow staircase descending deep into the darkness, an unsettling invitation into ThinkTech's inner sanctum. The contrast was jarring. One moment I was surrounded by the organic, chaotic life of the forest, and the next, I was staring into a passage that seemed to defy the natural order. The staircase was made of cold steel, each step sharp and perfect, almost as if I was the first person to ever come across this place. Bright, shimmering lights lined the walls at precise intervals, casting ghostly shadows that danced in the periphery of my vision. The air that wafted up from below was damp and musty, carrying the scent of earth and something else, something metallic and unsettling. With each step I took, the walls seemed to close in tighter, the oppressive silence broken only by the echo of my footsteps. The narrowness of the staircase amplified my unease, making me feel as though I was descending into the bowels of the earth, towards an unseen presence, a malevolent force waiting at the end of my journey. Yet I continued downward, each step a reluctant but necessary advance into the unknown. Finally reaching the bottom of the stairwell, I was enveloped by a silence so profound it felt suffocating, each breath a struggle against the oppressive stillness. Turning back around to look up at the staircase I had just descended, the world felt impossibly far away. In contrast to the staircase, this room was not well lit up only by the glow of the staircase. Shadows pressed in from all sides, thick and impenetrable, as if the darkness itself were alive, conspiring to swallow me whole. I moved forward cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the eerie void, until I stumbled upon a gallery that sent a chill through my bones. Lining the walls were photographs of missing persons, faces frozen in time, eyes wide with terror and desperation. It was immediately clear that these were captives, not volunteers. The name Project Mind's Eye was scrawled ominously across a large, decrepit sign hanging crookedly on the wall. My stomach churned as I realized the true horror of this place. Project Mind's Eye was not merely for observation, but for control. In the dim light, I could make out grotesque diagrams pinned to the walls, showing devices implanted in the subjects' skulls. These crude contraptions were designed to strip individuals of their autonomy, turning them into mere puppets for some sinister purpose. The cold, clinical nature of the setting clashed horribly with the reality of the human suffering it inflicted. My mind raced, the enormity of the revelation crashing over me like a wave. Each photograph, each diagram, each desperate face etched into my memory as I stood there, a lone witness to the depths of human depravity. As I documented this horror, the realization struck me. ThinkTech was expecting me. My every move had been orchestrated. They didn't need to hunt me down. They knew where I was at every moment. The door was opened, not to pursuers, but to guide me and others potentially like me deeper into the dark. A symphony of mechanical hums filled the air, the source elusive yet omnipresent. I felt rooted to the spot, a silent observer to unseen horrors. A door creaked open at the end of the room, its ominous presence beckoning me to uncover what lay beyond. But as I stood there, staring into the gaping maw of further darkness, my usual controlled disposition faltered. The weight of the photographs and diagrams, the faces of the missing and tormented, pressed heavily on my psyche. Fear surged through me, raw and unrelenting, eroding my resolve. My instinct for self-preservation screamed louder than my curiosity. I could feel the icy tendrils of dread creeping up my spine, tightening their grip around my heart. With a shaky breath, I made the decision to retreat, each step backward a surrender to the overwhelming terror that had seized me. The suffocating silence, the oppressive shadows, and the horrific revelations of Project Mind's Eye were too much to bear. As I turned away from the open door, I could only hope that retreating now would give me the strength to return and face this nightmare another day. My escape was a calculated retreat, not a desperate flight. For days, I didn't leave my apartment trying to piece together what I had witnessed. What was their plan? How far had they spread? The feeling of being watched was an unshakable companion. I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my bones. The shadows outside seemed to thicken and become larger with every night that passed, taking on a life of their own. From my window, I noticed them lurking on the streets below, their indistinct forms blending seamlessly with the darkness. They stood still, their presence ominous and foreboding, as if they were waiting for the right moment to strike. I pulled the curtains, hoping to shut out the unnerving sight, but the sense of being watched persisted. Moving through my apartment, I could almost feel these shadowy figures within the complex itself, lingering just beyond my door in the hallways, their vague silhouettes flickering in the dim light. Every creak and rustle seemed amplified, my senses on high alert as paranoia gnawed at me. The walls of my sanctuary felt increasingly thin, unable to keep out the creeping dread that these figures brought with them. It was clear that whatever dark forces I had encountered in the forest had followed me home, and there was no escaping their watchful eyes. These shadowy figures affirmed ThinkTech's awareness of my investigation. The final confrontation was not violent, but a quiet breach of my sanctuary through the front door in the dead of night. In the pitch black, there was a presence. Dr. Carter stood before me with a group of men, quiet and with blank expressions. "We are only trying to help," she pleaded, her voice a siren's call, beckoning for my compliance. "This is not down to us, but to those that can't be seen. Just as I stretched out my hand to you to bring you in, they stretched out theirs to bring us in." A laptop was presented to me, the only file on it, a video titled Patient Eye. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard before double-clicking the icon. The footage, grainy and unfocused, showed a woman strapped to a chair, electrodes attached to her head. The room was dimly lit, but had a sense of familiarity to it, evoking a feeling I had a few nights before. Had this been what lay beyond the door that I turned away from? The video played, revealing the woman's face wide with terror, her body convulsing as she struggled against the restraints. Her screams echoed through the speakers, piercing and desperate. "Where am I? Who are you?" Her pleas remained unanswered. A scientist stepped towards the center of the room. "The time is 1900 hours on the 10th of March, 2004. We are here with patient I, Emily. Emily has struggled through the foster system due to her mental health. Emily has displayed signs of childhood dementia. She has trouble concentrating, understanding, learning and communicating, frequent personality changes, severely disturbed sleep and behavioral issues such as hyperactivity. She is the perfect test subject to test out our new treatment." From this video, it was clear ThinkTech was providing this treatment without proper permission or authority. Pursuing progress, no matter the cost. The video continues with the scientist explaining the procedure. "Our treatment seeks to implant a device into the patient's brain. We will be stimulating it after insertion with an electronic pulse provided by the electrodes around the patient's head. This will activate said device to act as a bridge between various sections of the brain, allowing information to be stored and transferred on demand. A second brain, if you will. Dementia patients will no longer have to rely on the fragility of their own organic structures. The device will pick up every impulse sent through it." "What do you want with me?" The child screamed, holding back tears, the chilling intensity of her voice sending shivers up my spine. I could see the raw fear etched into her features, her gaze darting around the room as if trying to escape the horrors of the reality she was in. A new figure stepped into the frame, a much older man. His expression was one of cold, clinical detachment, a stark contrast to the girl's frantic terror. He glanced at the monitors, then at his team, his voice calm and commanding. "Initiate the sequence," he ordered. Not one person flinched or stalled for even a moment, beginning the sequence in synchronous harmony. Like drones, no sign of unease or uncertainty that they might not be right. The girl's screams intensified for a moment, then morphed into a monotonous drone. Her eyes glazing over, she fell silent. Even from the video, the silence in the room was palpable. It was as if time had stopped, everyone waiting for the child to speak and show signs of life. "I'm not alone in here anymore, am I?" Her voice, now void of emotion, repeated the haunting refrain like a broken record. The room around her seemed to pulse with a dark energy, the shadows on the grainy footage appearing to shift and writhe as if alive. The older man watched impassively, taking notes as the girl's words grew increasingly disjointed, her mind fracturing under the relentless pressure. "They are in my head. They control me. They are telling me things. They want more." The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing every twitch and spasm, every flicker of madness that crossed her eyes. Her transformation from a terrified human to a hollow shell was recorded in excruciating detail. The video ended abruptly, the screen going black, leaving me in a silence that felt louder than the screams. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold sweat clung to my skin. The shadows in my apartment seemed to stretch and lengthen, the memory of the girl's tortured cries echoing in my mind. Who are they? What did she mean by, "I'm not alone in here anymore, am I?" All these questions raced through my mind. I briefly forgot I was in my room, surrounded by ThinkTech's personnel. Then it clicked. The child. Emily. Doctor. Carter watched as the realization came to my face. Too stunned to speak, Doctor. Carter filled the air, not with her quiet and frightened voice that she had presented previously, but one similar to the cold and clinical nature of the older man in the video. I wouldn't be where I am today without them. They made me who I am. You only need to let them in. In that moment, be it clarity or madness, I grasped ThinkTech's true horror. They had not merely unlocked minds, they had opened doors to realms unfathomable, and within those depths lurked unseen powers. I was left with the question of how much of Emily is truly left. Is her body merely acting as a conduit for whatever them is, or is she still in there, with no control of the wheel, witnessing whatever horrors she has been made to watch in the last 20 years? I was told what to do, how to fix people, rid people of their pain, bring people's loved ones back from the brink. Can't you see that? I know what happened to you. Don't you want rid of those memories? The pain? Dr. Carter beckoned to me. The horror of ThinkTech's true intentions began to hit me. The anonymous company that had hired me was ThinkTech itself. They sought out reclusive individuals like myself, those who had been through hardship, knowing no one would come looking when we vanished or changed beyond recognition. I was just a pawn in a game repeated many times before. ThinkTech slowly amassing an army of meat puppets. Do ThinkTech even know what they are doing, or have they collectively lost control, being controlled by an invisible entity or entities? The shadows in my room began to get longer and darker, enveloping all that is around me. A sudden dizziness washed over me, and I stumbled backward, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath my feet. When I regained my bearings, I found myself sitting alone in the very same dimly lit room from the tape. I was disoriented and afraid. The same metallic smell and hum was present from before. I knew there was no point screaming out for help. I was truly alone, no one could possibly help me. I began to feel a tingling sensation in the back of my head. It was as if I could feel another presence in my mind, a sinister consciousness lurking just beyond the edges of my awareness. At first, it was just whispers, faint echoes that seemed to emanate from the depths of my own thoughts. But as I struggled to make sense of the situation, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became a cacophony of voices, each one vying for control. I could feel them rifling through my memories, rewriting them, twisting them into something unrecognizable. Panic surged within me as I realized that I was no longer alone inside my own head. I tried to fight back, to assert my own will, but it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with my bare hands. The presence in my mind was relentless, a puppeteer pulling at the strings of my consciousness with chilling precision. Every thought, every action was no longer my own. It was dictated by the unseen force that now held sway over me. I watched in horror as my body attempted to move of its own accord, like a marionette on strings, carrying out commands that I couldn't even comprehend. It was as if I were a prisoner in my own mind, forced to witness the unfolding nightmare from behind a veil of helplessness. And as the realization sank in that I was no longer in control, that I was nothing more than a vessel for this malevolent force, I knew that there was no escape. I was trapped, bound to this entity that now inhabited my mind. What was its goal? What was its purpose? Before I could work this out, I was thrust back into the darkness, encased within the walls of my head, a space that seemed to close in with malevolent intent. An infinite darkness. I was faced with the ultimate violation, not of home or privacy, but of self. In this new reality where consciousness could be commandeered, the terror lay in discerning what remained truly mine. Doctor, Carter's voice, so cold and detached, echoed in my mind. I was told what to do, how to fix people, rid people of their pain. How many people are not who they seem? How many people have been changed? ThinkTech are creating conduits for something beyond our comprehension to peer through, no longer watching us but taking control. I awoke in my apartment, sat at my desk. I knew I had to expose them, to warn the world. But as I sat in my dimly lit study, paranoia wrapped around me like a vice. Every shadow seemed to hide a pair of watching eyes. Every sound a whisper of something unseen. My own thoughts no longer felt like my own. In the end, it wasn't the fear of what think tech could do to my body that paralyzed me. It was the knowledge that they had already claimed my mind. The true horror of think tech was not just in their experiments, but in the realization that I might never know which of my thoughts were truly mine and which were theirs. Everything I see and do can be altered, changed, generated. For all I know, I'm stuck inside my own mind prison, being placated by them by being allowed to write this out, never to be seen by a soul, only existing within the bounds of my head. As I type this, I feel myself further falling into paranoia and madness. I'm unsure if these are my words or theirs. Is this a warning or a trap laid by them? I share this, not knowing if it's a desperate attempt by what's left of myself to reach out, or if it's think tech using me to spread their influence further. To whoever reads this, beware. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Story 4. How I took my life back. I live in a small, rural town that was nestled away from the hustle and bustle of city life in an area not that far from Richmond, Virginia. It's the kind of town that would take about 20 minutes to drive from one end to the other. There's this main road that cuts straight down the center of town, and everything is situated alongside or branching off from it. My house sat on a hill, just in front of a thick patch of trees which separated my house from the next street. The next street over in that particular direction was a little over half a mile, but as a kid it felt as big as the Amazon. I loved playing in the woods, and the sound of the leaves crunching underfoot as I ran from imaginary monsters or towards a castle in the trees. Those were good, simpler times. I'm an only child and I never really made any friends in school. Quite the opposite. Actually, I was bullied the entire time I was in school, until it happened. For the meantime, however, I found my solace using my imagination to take me on grand adventures under the shady canopy. One of the things that always interested me were the many different spiders that could be found living within these woods, all of various shapes and sizes, some harmless and others pretty lethal. They would adorn the trees like eight-legged ornaments. I would imagine I were a secret agent on a dangerous mission, dodging the almost invisible webs as if they were laser beams and could slice off an arm like butter. I've never been afraid of spiders, but I have always felt pity for them. As soon as any person sees one of them, their immediate reaction is to kill it, and that's a terrible way to live for any creature, spider and human alike. Because of this, if I would ever spot a spider inside my house or somewhere that was potentially dangerous for them, I'd always try to gently pick it up and take it to safety. I'd use a piece of cardboard or a stick and usher the little guy on, then carry them outside or to the grass or something and let them walk off. If I found one that I thought was especially interesting, like one with bright colors or abnormally long legs, I'd take it to the biggest tree in the woods and place it on a branch. Now it might sound silly to you, but I'd also talk to them, too. They wouldn't talk back. Obviously, I didn't think I was having real conversations with them or anything like that. I'd speak to them like you'd speak to your pet. I would always say hello whenever I saw them, and I'd apologize if I ever disturbed one of their meticulously crafted webs. I saw the spiders, and all creatures really, as equals to people. After all, we are, every one of us here on Earth, just trying to survive. My father, however, did not share my optimistic disposition. My father was, well, let's just say he was never going to win a Father of the Year award. My mother, God rest her soul, died giving birth to me, and I've always felt like he blamed me for it. From the stories my neighbors and aunt have told me, she was the sweetest person they'd ever met, and way too good for someone like my father. Shortly after my mum's passing, my Aunt Rose stayed with us for the first 5 years of my life or so, and things were about as good as they could be for people in our situation. But that all changed when one day I came home from school to find my aunt sitting on our porch alongside all her things. When I asked what was going on, she just simply stated that she had to leave and couldn't live with us anymore. It was only on one of my father's late-night benders that I found out she had tried to make a move on the old man, only for him to violently react with a slap to her face and a boot out the door. That day was the true start of his, and consequently my, downfall. He drank like a fish just about every night I can remember since then, and I actively avoided him every chance that I could. Some afternoons I'd come in to see him lazily slumped in his recliner, still clutching his precious and empty bottle. There was one night in particular he would drink much more than his usual amount, a day I had grown to despise and never looked forward to, my birthday. On that day, when I got off the school bus and headed down my long, curving driveway and into the woods as usual, I would make it a point to stay out later than normal to avoid dealing with my dad. Most of the time, even though it broke Dad's back before dark rule, I would walk into our little trailer to find his bedroom door shut and locked, with his obnoxious snores coming from inside. On my 11th birthday, however, it seemed my luck had finally run out. I had just walked in a little late from another escapade in the woods. As soon as I walked in, I could smell the liquor permeating the air of the small trailer. "Where you been, boy?" my father asked in a gruff tone before bringing the bottle of whiskey to his lips. I stammered a bit, but finally said, I was just outside playing with some friends, and He cut me off with a loud scoff. "You think you're funny? Boy, look at you. I know you ain't got no friends. You know my rules. Boy, I told you to be in this house before dark. Yet here you are coming in without a care in the world, and lies falling out of your mouth like ain't nobody waiting up for you." He took another swig of the dark liquid and looked me in the eyes. My heart started to race and my face grew hot. He smiled and said, "You know what to do. Go pick a switch." Now, for anyone who doesn't know, when your parents tell you to get a switch, they mean go outside and find a skinny, flexible stick so I can beat you with it, or I'll pick one myself. And trust me, you did not want them to get one. So, begrudgingly, I went outside and did as I was told. When I came back inside, my father was standing up, bottle still in hand and a stone-cold look of hate on his face. Hot tears began to form around my eyes as I said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to." He snatched the stick from my hand and yelled, "Are you about to give me lip? Boy, today of all days. I don't take back talk from arrogant little shits like you." He sat the bottle down and cocked his arm back, starting to whip me relentlessly and aiming for any bit of bare skin he could see. After about 8 or 9 swings, the stick started breaking into strands with every impact, leaving hot, stinging pain all over my body. Through my ensuing wails, I heard him chuckle. "Oh, now you've done it. Boy, you really thought you could bring me this hunk of shit and get away easy? Huh?" He dropped the broken piece of wood in his hand and grabbed the bottle off the countertop, taking a long drink. After he set it back down, his hands went to his belt, undoing the latch. "You better make a decision, boy." My heart stopped. Suspended in the eternity of seconds, it took him to remove the belt while fear bubbled inside me. "Do you want bruises on the front or back? Hurry up now, or I'm just going to start swinging wherever I want." He grunted as he gathered the belt in his hand. I began crying uncontrollably at this point, and therefore wasn't able to answer right away, which only made him angrier. I wiped the stinging tears away from my eyes and saw him glaring daggers at me. "Time's up," he said as he raised his hand up, preparing to unload his fury on me with the belt. I shut my eyes and tensed my body, ready for the imminent impact, my heart feeling as if it wanted to beat out of my chest. It's not true what they say, you know, about your life flashing before your eyes when you think you're going to die. In that moment, all I could see and hear was blackness. The world fell away, and my only thought was that I would die. "Ah, what the fuck?" my father called out as I heard the loud smack of a hand against skin. I opened my eyes to see the old man standing with his hand on the back of his neck. He pulled it away to reveal the squished remains of a spider in his palm. "Stupid fucking bugs," he shouted as he wiped his hand on his pants. I looked up at him, and a sudden wild idea crossed my mind, filling my face with heat. When I saw him reach over for the bottle, I acted without further hesitation. I bolted past him and ran for the door, not bothering to look back at the man I called my father. I heard his angry grunts as he downed the remaining alcohol just as I reached the door and turned the knob. The door flew open and I shot out of it like a bullet, heading into the woods. My heart beat like a drum and my vision was blurry from the tears. But I knew that if my dad caught me, he would probably actually kill me. I heard him shouting from the house, but I didn't look back. I pushed on. My mind was still back in the house, but my feet were on autopilot, carrying me towards the safety of the trees. I had run through these woods so many times before. I could probably run blindfolded and not hit a single tree. I reached the big one and stopped, my lungs burning with relentless intensity. I sat down and propped myself up against the tree, panting heavily and sweating. I tried to steady my breathing while still listening out for my father, but in my panic I thought I must have lost him. I turned slowly and stuck my head around the edge of the trunk, just as a size 12 steel toe boot was launched into my face, the force knocking me backwards. I screamed in agony as pain exploded throughout my head, blood already beginning to pour from my freshly broken nose. "You're gonna regret running away. Boy, you took my wife from me, the light of my life. You sucked all the life out of her like the mosquito you are, and you took my angel from me. My life has been hell ever since, and all you ever do is disobey me and make excuses. So, since you love these damn woods so much, I might as well bury you here and fix all my problems." My father snarled at me. I shut my eyes and tensed my body, preparing for the inevitable strike that would end my life. But it never came. Instead, I heard the loud thud of something massive hitting the ground. I opened my eyes when I heard the blood-curdling scream of my father to see an ungodly sight. There, standing impossibly in front of me, was an enormous spider, with legs as thick as telephone poles and mandibles as long as my arm. It lunged at my father and bit down on his shoulder, leaving 2 huge holes when it pulled away. The wounds instantly darkened, and my father's blood began to bubble around the edges of the holes. His body stiffened and he screamed again, falling over to the ground. I sat paralyzed with fear, my heart feeling like it would explode at any second. My father's body, however, was paralyzed by other means, for he remained stiff while continuing to scream and plead for help. The monster then turned its eyes to me, blinking a few of them. "Do not be afraid, young one," a voice spoke in my mind. The spider's huge mandibles produced chittering and clicking sounds as the words entered my head, and I knew it was speaking to me. "We do not mean you any harm, little one. He, however, will not be so lucky," the beast clicked, rolling my father's body underneath its massive body as it began to cocoon my still wailing dad. It spoke again. "Do you remember me, little one? It has been many nights since then. I was the first you brought here, to this tree. For countless decades, your kind have been hostile to us, ending our lives beneath their heels or swatting us with newspapers. It is why we birth so many young, for most of them shall never get the chance to live a full life. You, however, are different." It then finished the cocoon and the words continued in my brain. "Ever since you brought me here, I have grown and I have watched you. Since then, you have continued to show kindness to many of us. These woods are filled with those who have benefited from your selfless actions." My father then made a gurgling noise as he tried to choke out my name. It seemed the toxin was spreading all over, for when I looked into his eyes, they were a dark shade of purple. No irises to speak of. He tried to talk, but it sounded like his throat was closing up because he produced a wheezing sound. I looked back to the spider and asked, "Is he going to die?" The monster chittered its response. "Not for another few hours. No, he will stay paralyzed until it is over. However, and he will feel everything until the end. Does this upset you?" I paused for a minute and shook my head, then asked another question. "So wait, that spider that bit him in my house, is that how you watched me?" Another few gurgling and coughing sounds came from my father before the spider replied, clicking its wet mandibles together. "Of course. As I said, these woods are filled with those who owe you their lives. He was to alert us if ever things got too bad, but he chose to give his life to help you of his own accord. Before he died, He released a pheromone which alerted us to danger, and that is when I knew something was wrong. Many more of my kind would gladly do the same. It's because of you that most of us are here. A small feeling of pride welled up inside me, and for once in a long time, I felt loved. My good feelings were gone an instant later, when once again my father choked on words which would not form. I walked over and crouched down so my face was close to his, studying all the dark veins under his skin. "What was that?" was all I said. After about half a minute of gags and gurgles, he finally said, "I'm sorry. Son, please, help me." I looked into his dark, sick eyes, stood up and said, "Are you about to give me lip? Boy, you know the rules. Pick a switch. Better hurry up, or I'll decide for you." His eyes grew wide as our moment of clarifying silence hung in the air. Slowly, I backed away from him and looked over to the monstrous spider and gave him a nod of confirmation. The beast shrieked in delight, while dozens of spiders descended down from branches and slowly covered my still choking father, beginning to wrap around his coffin made of web. Within minutes, he was completely secured in webbing, and I stood there, patiently waiting until his muffled groans fell silent. A vicious smile crept its way across my face as I watched the hundreds of strands descend upon him, lifting him slowly into the trees as if he were being raptured. A sudden relief washed over me, and my eyes began to water while I looked upon the denizens of the trees. Thank you all," I said to my unlikely saviors, these supposed pests abhorred by society, and I turned away to head back up to my now empty house. The chittering and scurrying of millions of tiny legs following me brought an almost alien emotion back into my life. Joy. I didn't write this as some sort of confession or form of atonement in any way. Oh no, this is a testament to the tenacity of life, the will to survive. My father was a real piece of shit, and even now, after 3 long years without him, I do not regret what happened. In fact, I revel in knowing that he isn't around to spread his hateful nature anymore, because with his life taken, mine could finally start. Shortly after this, I began going to school again, because even I knew that if I went missing from school, cops would be involved. So I kept my head down for the most part. But never again did I allow myself to be bullied. It's funny how one small little creature can make someone sick for days, or leave burning welts all over your skin, or even kill you. Word spread quickly amongst the delinquents about weird shit seeming to happen with anyone who fucked with me. And eventually they left me alone. Everyone left me alone. My only friends now are the 8-legged inhabitants of the woods, and I very much prefer it that way. Let this serve as a warning to those of you who treat others as lesser life forms than yourself. All life has value, no matter how small. Story 5. My friend invited me to a sleepover at his house. We weren't allowed to wake up before his parents. When I was 11, I was at the very bottom of my class until the teacher, Ms. Henry, made me sit next to the new kid. Thomas and his family moved into town halfway through term, so he just sort of appeared one day. During his second week, Ms. Henry tried to draw him out of his shell by asking about his favorite TV program. "What's a TV program?" he replied. That got a laugh. Clearly, he was playing dumb to put one over on her. Everybody thought he'd emerge as the next class clown, but instead he rarely spoke and aced every subject. A few girls tried befriending him. They dug that Children of the Corn look, I guess, but agreed he was a weirdo after chatting with him in the lunch hall. As desk buddies, he and I locked horns. A lot. Because I was left-handed, our elbows bumped together whenever we wrote, and he got super pissed anytime I asked to borrow a pencil. So I, of course, did this as often as possible. Anytime I asked Ms. Henry to split us up, she'd just sneer and say, "Ryan, there's going to be times in life when you're forced to spend time with people you don't like. Get used to it." One day, as I struggled with a difficult maths exam, Thomas offered to help. I'm guessing he finished early and got bored. It was my first A, without either of us ever agreeing to it. He started helping me with homework and tough assignments, and soon my grades improved so much my mom bought me a bunch of Pokemon cards as reward. I offered Thomas some of the one I already owned, but he didn't even know what a Pokemans was. Then one day, out of the blue, he asked if I'd sleep over at his place. "Father really wants to meet you," he said. Why did his parents even know who I was? We sat together, sure, but he knew so little about pop culture. Getting through a conversation was like chewing cult. Still, I wanted to thank him for his help, and my mom didn't raise any objections. So that Friday I packed some clothes and cycled over to his place. I drove down several short roads flanked by woods, past a train station, toward the outskirts of town. Thomas's two-story house sat at the top of a long driveway so steep that I needed to jump off my bike and push most of the way. And all the windows were either boarded up or had the curtains pulled shut. Things got spooky the second I arrived. Thomas and his parents waited patiently to greet me, each grinning like they were on a poster for tooth whitening. Everybody had matching blonde hair and dressed in plain shades of brown, grey, and white. A large man introduced them as the Donovans. My preteen brain categorized him and his wife as old, but in retrospect, there must have been a 20-year age difference there. Mr. Donovan walked my bike into the garage while me and Thomas followed his mom inside. Something was wrong with the house. It looked too sterile. No clutter, zero toys scattered about. Plus, the antique furniture was older than my grandparents'. In every room, sheets had been draped over objects mounted along the paneled walls, and Mrs. Donovan made a point of telling me that touching the sheets is strictly forbidden. She led us into a sitting room decorated with crucifixes, and more crucifixes, of varying sizes. We kneeled down on a colorful rug, facing each other. The only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock. At last, Mr. Donovan joined our group and led a prayer for the standard stuff. Good health, blessed weather. Even though I'd gone to Protestant church with my grandparents, I couldn't figure out what religion we were meant to be practicing. He obviously thought of himself as a spiritual leader and devoted a lot of time to the blind sinners who would suffer swift retribution on Judgment Day. It wasn't until he called for a minute of holy silence that I heard a low, shaken voice. I concentrated hard, tuning out the clock. There were muffled cries from somewhere within the room. I peeked my left eye open. Nobody was watching, although the way the family didn't stop grinning made me shiver. I glanced around the room. We were alone. When I turned back towards the circle, Thomas's mom was staring straight at me, her smile practically splitting the seams of her face. Quickly, I shut my eyes, already anxious to go home. The silence seemed to last forever. Finally, the spiritual leader clapped his hands and said we should go out back and toss a ball around. On my way out of the room, I listened for more cries, but the sound had died off. I figured my imagination got the better of me. As Thomas and I tossed a leather ball back and forth in the long grass, his dad watched from a crude decking area, beaming. Like at school, Thomas threw with his right hand, whereas I favored my left. We kept trying to pass each other bad shots, competing to make the other miss a catch. It was all in good fun, though. Thomas acted even weirder than at school. Away from his parents, he at least seemed interested in subjects like TV, but now he strictly spoke about Bible stories and recited his favorite verses. I sidestepped his questions, my spirituality, as much as I could. My arm was aching by the time Mrs. Donovan called us for dinner. In the kitchen, we gathered around the table, and then she brought in a metal pan, presenting 5 boneless chicken breasts lathered in lumpy gravy and canned peaches. Before we ate, everybody linked arms for another prayer, and part of me wished the ritual would never end, because then we'd need to choke down the food. A heavy silence fell over the room. Then those cries started up again, closer than before. It sounded like a child, and their voice had a panicky quality. If it wasn't for the threat of another glare from Thomas's mom, I would have peeked. As the prayer dragged on, the crying became more hysterical, until finally something rattled against the wall behind me. Mr. Donovan's voice raised, thunderous now, and drowned out the sound. I'm not sure which scared me more, but either way my arms broke out in goosebumps. The sermon ended 5 minutes later, and we sat there in silence until the head of the table said, "Amen." I checked the corners for sobbing children, finding only more sheets. What then? A CD player? My imagination? The uncooked chicken made me gag. I didn't want to cause trouble, so I picked around the moldy peaches and spread out the plate so it looked like I'd eaten more than I actually had. There was chocolate cake for dessert, but Thomas's mom went around slicing a piece onto each of our plates, which were still covered with chicken and gravy. By that point my stomach was growling, so I scoffed down a top layer of cake which hadn't touched anything else. I wanted to leave, faking a bellyache. I asked if they would call my mom and have her come pick me up. Thomas's dad raised an eyebrow. "No need. We have a special remedy." He told the rest of the family to pray for my health and led me out of the room. The front door was on my left, and I briefly considered making a run for it, but the second I did, Mr. Donovan's hand clamped around my shoulder, tight. His smile never wavered, but something about his eyes made me break out in goosebumps, like an implied threat. So I let him guide me into a vintage bathroom. There was a covered cabinet above the sink, and the tub was already full. A thick layer of scud, plus a few dead flies, floated along the surface. Mr. Donovan poured something into the murky water, salt maybe, and ordered me to strip off my t-shirt so I could dip my midsection in. I told him I'd made a miraculous recovery. "Ah, the power of prayer," he said, grinning so wide I could count the back teeth. After that, he announced it was time for bed, despite the fact it wasn't even dark yet. Upstairs, at the very far end of the hall, a huge object spanning the width of both walls was covered by another sheet. We got ushered me into Thomas's room, which was even more dull and lifeless than the rest of the house. A queen-sized bed, one small cupboard, and a single wooden chair tucked in the corner. We needed to share the bed, but only after another round of prayer. Then, it was lights out before 9 o'clock. Alone with my friend, I rolled over and asked what religion his family practiced anyway. He gave the vaguest answers possible, and when I pushed him, became hyper-defensive. So, I said, "Hey, do you ever want to punch Ms. Henry right in her stupid, ugly face?" That made him laugh. Away from his parents, he became more like his school self. Not normal, but closer than before. We argued over who the hottest girl in class was, followed by the most annoying. Without meaning to, I brought up one who always teased him, and it was like all the energy leaked out of my new friend. "I know everybody thinks I'm odd." He sighed. "They just need to get to know you like I did. They'll come around." "You think so?" "Absolutely." He smiled. Then, after a little while, he said, "Hey, want to see something creepy? I'll show you if you think you're brave enough not to wet the bed." I rolled my eyes. He wanted to rattle me, like when we played ball. "Sure. We've got to wait until Mother and Father retire for the night." I kept asking what he had planned, but he wouldn't answer. He got a kick out of keeping me in the dark. I think he waited until the house fell quiet, and then swung his legs out of bed. "This way." In the chilly, dark hall, enough moonlight shone through the windows beside the staircase to see by, as we tiptoed past several closed doors. But crying returned, growing louder as we approached the object beneath the black sheet. Not my imagination then. Facing me, Thomas whispered, "Don't worry if he looks at you. Just make sure you look away fast. You'll be fine so long as you look away fast." Before I could ask what that meant, he crouched down, grabbed the corner of the sheet, and pulled it back, revealing an antique armoire. Suddenly the crying became less muffled. A mirrored panel ran along the bottom section, surrounded by fine, gargoyle-like carvings. Still holding the blanket, Thomas pushed his left ear against the carpet and stared at the glass. "He's there. Come look quick." I just wanted to get this over with. I lay down. For a second I stared at the reflected hall, confused about why we were even there. But then an out-of-place shape caught my eye. I told myself it was my reflection, but then realized I had no reflection. A boy was standing in the corner with his back to us. His shoulders went up and down like he couldn't stop sobbing. "Do you see him?" Thomas asked. I swallowed a gulp, my blood running cold. Niato, huh? My brain scrambled for an explanation. It was a trick, or a nasty prank. I looked behind me, nothing, only a bare patch of wall. He's not there, Thomas said, only in the mirror. When I looked back, the boy was much closer and crouched on his side, nose to nose with me. His features were all stretched out, long and narrow like a funhouse mirror, and he had a shock of blonde hair to go with them. His thin lips twisted into a grotesque smile as the boy reached out to me, the tips of his fingers pushing through the glass into reality. I couldn't move a muscle until his face is only inches away from mine, his breath blasting me in the face like a gust of cold air. I scrambled away. If my throat hadn't hitched itself shut, I would have screamed. Quickly, Thomas dropped the sheet and dragged me up by the shoulder, then shoved me down the hall. Behind us, the armoire thrashed from side to side, its hinges squeaking. The boy crying again. Now his voice had an almost hysterical quality. Back in the safety of his room, Thomas pressed his ear against the door until the armoire quietened down. "We are blessed Father didn't hear," he said. "Now we sleep. Father said we aren't to rise before he wakes us to begin the morning ritual." He must not have been the least bit scared by what we saw, because he ushered me into bed and dozed off straight away. But my body wouldn't quit trembling. What was that thing in the mirror? Were there more of them? Is that why they hung sheets everywhere? But why keep any mirrors at all? One thing was for sure, I couldn't spend the night in that house. But Thomas's dad would never let me go. I needed to get the hell out of there without being seen. After Thomas's breathing eased into a rhythm, I swung my legs onto the floor and tiptoed out of the room, toward the stairs. But as I approached the top, footsteps came clomping along. I ducked behind the nearest door. Through the narrow gap, I watched Mr. Donovan march past with a rectangular object tucked beneath his arm. There was a tinkling sound from beneath the sheet. He carried it over to Thomas's room, grunting the whole way, and disappeared through the door. My stomach lurched into my throat. I didn't want to find out what he had planned. I flew down the stairs, carefully, quietly. I kept my hand against the wall for guidance. The front door was locked. My bike still was in the garage. I hoped. But how did I get there from the landing? Above my head, there were angry shouts of, "He's gone!" No time for plans. I sprinted around the ground floor, flying from room to room. Cries rang out in everyone. And now the objects beneath the sheets danced on the walls. Bouncing around, the crying child sounded terrified now, like they were in pain. Past the kitchen, there was a cramped utility room with another door. The temperature plummeted as I bolted through it, into the garage. The light switch was on the inside wall. I flicked it. Then a naked bulb blinked on. Junk was scattered everywhere. Car parts, step ladders, boxes of old newspapers, and more sheets thrown over different mirrors, each flapping and twisting. There were more cries, except not just the boy, and for a second I was afraid to move. But then a door slammed shut behind me, and I ran for it. My bike was propped up against the wall beside the exit, its handlebar stubbornly tangled with a Christmas tree. After a few tugs, it came loose, and it was like setting off a Rube Goldberg machine. A mop and bucket fell into a stepladder, which clattered to the floor and sent a bag of marbles sprawling across the floor, and so on. I grabbed the bike's handlebars. The exit was one of those old fold-up doors you needed to twist the handle to open. My hands were shaking so badly I needed to set the bike aside and focus solely on this task. The door rotated up. Behind me, Thomas's dad burst into the room, and for the first time he'd stopped smiling. He rushed after me but struggled to get through the minefield of junk. My bike's rear wheel became tangled with a sheet, and when I started running it came away like a magician ripping away a tablecloth. I heard the mirror fall to the floor and shatter. Laughter rang out, and when I glanced back over my shoulder, bone-thin arms were reaching out of the glass, towards Mr. Donovan, as the garage light rapidly flicked on and off. "Mr. Donovan screamed. "I will never, as long as I live." Forget the terror in that scream. Pure adrenaline got me out of there, without slowing down. I sprinted to the top of the driveway and leapt onto the bike and flew down the hill. Behind me, screams rang out from deeper in the house. I didn't stop to look back. Mom wasn't pleased about me cycling home so late, but I made up an excuse about Thomas's family getting sick and needing to leave in a hurry, so she let it slide. I knew she'd never believe my story. I tried faking an illness to get out of school because I was so anxious about seeing Thomas again, but she was having none of it. I spent all of Saturday and Sunday wondering about what I'd seen. On Monday, my desk buddy sat without breathing a single word. We never spoke again, and we didn't bump elbows once. To my great relief, Ms. Henry announced Thomas's family had moved again the very next day. I never saw him after that, although for a while I had nightmares about his dad dragging me back inside their house, and they tend to flare up any time I see a mirror-fronted armoire. Story 6. The key to knowing Billy. When my husband and I were first presented with the idea that we move in with my grandmother, to say we were less than enthusiastic was an understatement. It's not that I don't love my grandmother or anything, but my husband and I have been married less than a year and want to have a place on our own. However, for financial reasons, while we both get settled into our new jobs, we figured this would be the best option for us. Plus, we'd get to move out of our too small for two people apartment and would be able to take care of my grandmother and keep her company. We moved in about a month ago, and I gotta say, up until a few nights ago, it was going pretty smoothly. My grandmother was loving the company and having the help around the house, and my husband and I have had a lot more privacy than we thought, since we have the whole finished basement to ourselves. Thursday night, though, everything changed. I woke up at around 3 a.m. needing to pee. As I walked back from the bathroom, one of the floorboards beneath my foot came loose, so loose that I could lift it up. I was getting ready to put it back into place and deal with fixing it the next day, when I noticed something under the floorboard. It was a small gold key attached to a keychain that said Billy. I'm not sure why, but I felt this sickening feeling in my stomach as soon as I grabbed it. Still, curiosity got the best of me, and I headed back to our bedroom, stuffing the key in the bedside drawer next to me. At breakfast the next morning, I wanted to see if my grandmother knew anything about the key or Billy. For some reason, my gut was screaming at me to proceed with caution, so I approached the subject softly. "Hey, Grandma, who's Billy?" She put her coffee mug down and took a deep breath. I could feel the tension grow as we sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, after what was realistically about 30 seconds, she looked at me with an expression I had never seen from her before. Pure rage. "Where did you hear that name?" she half yelled. Knowing I shouldn't tell her about the key I found, I quickly mumbled, "Oh, I think I heard his name mentioned in one of my mom's childhood stories she was telling me the other day." "Meh," she answered, unconvinced. The anger seemed to have subsided, though, and my grandma walked away from the table to sit outside. Unnerved by my grandmother's reaction to me asking about Billy, I began cleaning. Cleaning is something I do when I'm feeling particularly anxious or afraid. I'm not sure why, but it's soothing. As I ran the broom across the kitchen floor, I heard my grandmother talking outside. I know I should have respected her privacy, but the hushed, rapid tone in which she was speaking piqued my curiosity. I hid myself under the window and listened. "If you didn't tell Lacey about Billy, then where did she hear about him?" A short pause followed while she listened to the person on the other end of the phone, who I assume was my mother, respond. "Well, if she brings it up to you, keep your mouth shut about it. I can't relive that again." Almost immediately after my grandma hung up the phone, my husband walked through the door from work. He had just started working the overnight shift at his job, so him getting home from work at 11 a.m. and spending the rest of the day sleeping before eating and leaving again was our new normal. He saw me crouched under the window and looked at me confused. "Lace, what the hell are you doing?" He laughed. "Shh," motioning to him with my finger in front of my lips. I quickly got up and rushed him into the bedroom. He must have thought I rushed him in there for a different reason, because he had a smirk on his face as I closed the door. Az put his arms around my waist and leaned in to kiss me. I whispered, "I have to tell you something." In a hushed tone, I told him about the key I found and the whole interaction with my grandmother and the phone call I overheard. "Who do you think Billy is?" Jack asked, changing into his pajamas. "I have no idea. But what's with all the secrecy? And what is this a key to? And lace. There's clearly a reason why it's a secret. You heard your grandma. It's too painful to relive. Just let it go." "I guess," I said in a way that didn't convince him or me I would stop looking for answers. Later that night, I was watching TV. Jack was at work and my grandma had gone to bed at like 8 o'clock. I went into my bedroom and opened my bedside drawer. I studied the key, wondering what it opened. I decided I would take advantage of being alone and explore the house. I knew I couldn't go anywhere near my grandmother's room on the 3rd floor because I couldn't risk waking her up. I crept into the laundry room at the far end of the basement and started rummaging through drawers and the linen closet. Nothing. I went into the walk-in closet in the other bedroom in the basement. The light in the closet was busted, so I was using the flashlight on my phone. As I scanned around the closet, I noticed all the way in the back my light was reflecting off of something. The closer I got, the sicker to my stomach I felt. When I finally reached the end of the closet, I saw it, a keyhole. I took a deep breath and wondered if I really wanted to find out what was on the other side. It was as if everything in me was telling me not to do it, but I felt like not knowing would drive me crazy. I put the key into the hole and, to my surprise, it fit. When I opened the door, nothing could have prepared me for what was on the other side. I opened the door in the closet and crouched through the entryway. When I got to the other side, I could barely breathe from the stench of rot. I was in a bedroom, a kid's bedroom that looked like it had not been touched since the 1950s. There were clothes strewn on the bed and the floor, toys scattered throughout the room, and a boy's bed off in the corner. "What the fuck?" I whispered to myself. As I walked further into the room, I noticed some pictures and drawings on the desk. The pictures were of a young boy sitting on a tree swing, smiling widely. I turned the picture over and saw in small writing, "Billy, July 1955. I tucked the picture away in my pocket. I started to get this eerie feeling like someone was watching me. I knew I needed to get the hell out of there. I grabbed a notebook I found on the desk and scurried out of the room, making sure to lock the door behind me. I could swear that as I turned the lock, I could hear a little boy yell, "Don't." Spooked, I quickly made my way back to my bedroom. I was stopped in my tracks by my grandmother standing at the bottom of the stairs. She hadn't seen me, but the enraged look on her face told me she knew something was going on. I had a small, but possible, chance that I could make it to my bedroom without my grandmother seeing me. In that moment, I felt like a child wanting to run and hide under their covers from the scary monster. I slowly got on all fours and as quietly as humanly possible and made my way to the bedroom. By the time I got in there, my grandmother was checking out the laundry room. I quickly made my way into my bed and pulled the sheets over me, pretending to be asleep. After about 5 minutes, I heard my grandmother's slow and heavy footsteps approach my room. I don't know why, but I was scared stiff. My grandmother never scared me before. In fact, I really never saw her angry until I asked about Billy. Slowly, her footsteps approached my bed until they stopped right in front of me, pretending to be asleep. I could feel my grandmother's face inching closer and closer to mine. She was so close that if I opened my eyes, I'm positive my eyelashes would graze her face. I could feel her hot breath on my face, feel the sweat dripping from her forehead. It took everything in me to keep from screaming. My grandmother just stood there, hovering over my face for at least 20 minutes. I know it sounds crazy, but in those 20 minutes I don't think she ever blinked. You might be asking, how would you know if your eyes were closed? But if she could feel my eyelashes if I opened my eyes, wouldn't I feel hers if she closed them? After 20 minutes, that felt like 20 years. I heard my grandmother slowly inch backwards from my bed. I mistakenly thought this terrifying ordeal was over, but I was wrong. My grandmother sat in the chair of the vanity not too far from my bed and sat there watching me until morning. In the morning, I opened my eyes pretending as if I was just waking up and not silently freaking out with my eyes closed for the last few hours. When I turned to look at the vanity, my grandmother wasn't there. I heard footsteps upstairs and could tell she was in the kitchen. How the hell didn't I hear her leave? I walked up the stairs and into the kitchen. My grandmother was making eggs and had brewed coffee. "Good morning, dear," she sweetly said as she handed me a plate of eggs. "How'd you sleep?" Okay, I guess." She was pretending nothing happened. I certainly wasn't going to bring up last night. As I sat down and began eating my eggs, I could feel my grandmother's eyes on me. I looked up and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My grandmother's eyes, fixated on me, were completely black for a split second before turning back to normal. She still was acting like nothing happened last night. "What is your day like today?" she asked, getting up to put her plate in the dishwasher. "I'm going to run to the store to pick up some clothes for my new job, and then I'm going to do some grocery shopping." Normally I would ask her to come along. Not today, though. I needed out of that house and away from whatever the hell the thing acting like my grandmother was. Instead of going shopping for clothes, I drove to a park outside of town and found a spot under a tree to read the notebook I had found in that bedroom last night. It was Billy's journal. Most of the pages were filled with what he had done that day, drawings and stories. The last 3 pages, however, sent chills down my spine. July 25th, 9:55. Mom and Dad don't believe me. Jane is acting weird. I mean, she's always been weird, but not like this. I told them that in the middle of the night last night, I heard weird noises from Jane's room. When I peeked through the door, she talking to someone in the corner and laughing. She must have felt me there, because she turned around really quick, and I swear her eyes were black for a second. Mom said not to swear if something isn't true, because it's a sin, but I swear I saw her eyes like that. She closed the door in my face, and I ran back to bed. August 11th, 1955. I haven't been feeling too good. Ever since that night, I'm scared to be alone with Jane. No one believes me, but she's getting weirder and weirder. The other day, when Mom and Dad were out at the store, I was playing marbles outside by myself. I heard some rustling coming from the other side of the yard. When I looked up, Jane was running on all fours toward the chicken coop. She had this creepy look on her face, like it was contorted into an evil grin, and her eyes were bloodshot. When she got to the coop, I hid behind the tree and saw Jane pounce into the coop, grab a chicken with her hands, and start eating it alive. My eyes filled with tears, and I felt pee dripping down my leg. Just then my parents' car pulled in front of the house, and Jane's face jerked up. She quickly scampered away, back into the house. When my parents found me, I told them what happened. They didn't believe me and sent me to my room. August 25th, 1955. It's really hard to write because I'm too weak. After Mom and Dad sent me to my room, they locked the door from the outside. Later that night, Mom opened the door to bring me food and some water. She told me I should think about the consequences of lying and closed the door. When Mom locked the door, I heard her gasp and knew she had seen Jane. She told Jane not to creep up on her like that and to go get washed up before bed. Mom repeated herself a few times before I heard her scream out in agony. When my dad came down to check, he met a similar fate. I had backed myself up against the wall and sat there clutching my knees. Slowly, I heard the door creak open. I kept my eyes closed tightly as Jane approached me. She whispered that I needed to learn my lesson, or I'd end up like Mom and Dad. I opened my eyes and Jane was covered in blood. She had this deranged smile on her face, and her eyes stayed open and wide as she backed away out of the room. Before she closed the door, she stared at me and let out a cackle, never once changing her facial expression or closing her eyes. I've been in here for a long time. I think at least 2 weeks. I'm hungry. I don't think I can go on much longer. The journal ended there. I quickly called my mom and asked her about Billy. Why did he describe Grandma like that? Why didn't anyone ever mention she had a brother? You told me Grandma's parents died in a car accident when she was 13. Leave it alone, Lacey. I'm serious. I don't want to talk about it. Just don't let Grandma know you know anything more than his name, she said before hanging up. I rushed home and woke up my husband. I whispered to him that he needed to leave and go to a friend's house or something. He had so many questions, but I told him he needed to go now. I didn't want to drag him further into this. My husband, usually one to be logical, saw the fear in my eyes and quickly was out the door. I followed him upstairs and saw my grandmother in the yard gardening. I called out to her that I was going to go grocery shopping a little later, but decided to come back home and take a nap first. "Okay, sweetie," she waved. I went downstairs, locking the door behind me. I quickly grabbed the key out of my pocket and made my way back to the room in the closet. When I got into the bedroom, I started looking for any clues as to what happened to Billy. I was overcome with that same putrid smell of rot as I searched through the room. I opened a toy chest that sat at the foot of the bed and immediately gagged. Inside was a skeleton of a child, dressed in the same clothes Billy was wearing in the picture. As I reached for my cell phone to call the police, I heard the door to the room slam behind me. At the door stood my grandmother. She looked at me, eyes filled with rage. Instead of yelling, she laughed. She laughed, and laughed, and laughed with that same expression Billy described. "If only you had listened to me, you little bitch. You know why your mom is so scared of me? 'Cause when she was little, if she misbehaved, I'd lock her in the room with Billy. I thought we should have done the same to you since you were such a little brat growing up. But your mother made me promise I'd never do that. I promised not to. If she promised never to bring up Billy, no need to bring up old news. But you had to be a little nosy. Rotten bitch." She was right in front of me now. Her face was inches from mine, staring at me with her black, soulless eyes and a face that no longer resembled my grandmother's. We stood in silence like that for a few seconds before I tried to run. I felt my grandmother's hand grab onto my arm, and I turned around. She suddenly looked like my grandmother again. "Oh, dear, this is your home now." My grandmother crawled toward the door, contorting her body in unhuman ways as she moved. She looked back at me and I shrieked in horror. She had my face now, my body, and my voice. She laughed once more and closed the door behind her. Now, I'm stuck in this room, a room I wish I never found. I need to find a way out. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.